Hey, Adil.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. What's up with you?
Nothing much.
It's good.
Just making a podcast with one of my good friends, Fatima Sharif.
You consider me a good friend?
Yeah, I've known you now, what's it been, like 4 years?
It has been 4 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I think, we've gotten pretty close. And,
Yeah,
I
I'd
would
say
say, like,
so.
you're one of my good friends.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about this conversation is I remember the first time you told me that I was your best friend, and I was like, oh, that's kind of sad.
Well, moving on. Okay, so we are starting a podcast. The podcast is called Coffee and Dates. So we will be consuming coffee and dates, and it's a play on the idea of coffee dates. I
Yeah.
just thought it would be funny. What is this podcast going to be about?
That's a good question, Adil. I am a little hesitant to confine ourselves because I feel like if I say something and then we think of a different idea, then we're going to be like, well, we can't change our mind. We already said what it was going to be about.
So basically, we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves. So I think the idea of this podcast is that we want to have like open and blunt conversations about topics that you know we we discuss amongst ourselves often, and you know I would say a lot of the topics we want to talk about are things that you talk about with your friends. My friends don't talk about anything like that. So if we were talking about what my friends talk about, we would be talking about Victor Wembanyama and his summer league debut, which was last night. But that's kind of boring.
Yeah, that does sound boring.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
that's why I'm your best friend.
I mean, I don't think it's boring, but I think our shared interest doesn't lie in Victor Wembanyama. So
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like I am pretty blunt and honest, and I feel like I'm not really scared to, be more realistic about, the realities of life. And sometimes when I'm talking to friends, I feel like I kind of end up having the same conversations that I feel like would be really good to know, especially as younger, generations. I kind of wish I knew a lot of this stuff too. So that's kind of where I want this to go, for people to hear this and maybe like learn something from it or be entertained. But there's just, I think sometimes you have conversations and you're like, I want this recorded.
yeah, and I think the balance of like how serious some of these topics are, and I think I will be here to provide comic relief.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think you have a really good perspective on a lot of issues. Even like from sometimes when, my friends come to me for issues, with their permission, I ask you for advice about it too, or what your, view of it is. It's really refreshing kind of to see the male perspective because obviously before I got married, I didn't really ever think about it or see that.
Oh, you're married?
I,
Friend zoned.
yeah,
I
sorry,
don't know.
man. Um, but yeah, I think you've changed my mind a lot of times with your view of things, and I think it's always not a lot of people get to especially with like girl problems and stuff. You don't usually get like a guy side of it, so I think it's cool to hear that.
Your friends must be struggling if they're listening to anything I have to say. But besides the point, let's like talk a little bit about what kind of topics we're talking about. You've been talking very generally. Are you talking about things like issues they may have at work, your friends, or issues you may have at work, or is it like familial issues? Are you talking about like issues between friends, relationships? What are you talking about, really?
I think all of the above. I think, I can think every single subject that you just named or topic. I feel like I can think of a conversation that we have had in the last, few weeks, where I've come to you asking you about something, or like, I've wanted your opinion on something. And I think, yeah, all the above. I mean, all of these issues are things that people are going to be, uh, like someone's going to be able to relate to every single one of these topics. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think we can also talk about like your disdain and jealousy towards me because of how art crats love me more.
I I feel like I grew up thinking that, the idea of an interracial marriage is kind of a taboo, honestly. I think, like, I come from a culture that is very, you get married to people that your parents know and have known for generations. You don't stray away from that. You usually get married pretty young, and, it's usually it's usually an arranged marriage. For the most part, and there's a very like finite pool of people that you can pick from because they have to be from this culture or this tribe, and they have to speak the specific language. So that's kind of how I grew up thinking about it, is like, oh, I did not grow up thinking that I would ever end up pursuing something like that. That wasn't really like a goal of mine or anything like that. I just thought that was something that like other people do that. I'm not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation about marrying someone outside the culture before I ever talked to someone outside of my culture. So I told my mom, like, hey, if I bring home a girl that's not Desi, like, you have to be okay with it because racism is haram. So
Well, how old are you when you had that conversation?
probably like 18 or 19.
Oh,
It was
wow.
like my freshman year in college. So maybe even 17. So
I guess, like, I could see how the fear of, someone saying that to their parent like that young, especially like, a lot of parents would think that's very young, especially for a boy to get married. Them going up to their parent and saying something like that, I feel like the fear is the parent assumes you already have someone.
Yeah, but
in
then
mind.
there is no fear because there is no one. So like, if you're really serious about like wanting that option open, or like you can see yourself like being able to get along with someone outside of your culture, then you should have that conversation before you string someone along. Like I was doing like a show at an MSA in Virginia, and like a lot of my jokes, not a lot, like a few of my jokes are about like being in an interracial marriage. And then this kid came up to me after, and he's like, well, man, like, how'd you do it? He was like 18-year-old, like, freshman kid in college. I'm just like, he's like, oh, like, he's like, I'm talking to this girl or whatever. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, yeah, it's probably not going to work out. I'm like, you're 18, man. But I told him, like, no, however long you've been talking to her, like, you need to tell your parents about it now. And that's, like, the best advice I think anyone ever gave me was, like, I remember it was my friend. He was like a senior when I was a freshman, and he told me this, I think, when he was a super senior and I was a sophomore. So he was in his fifth year, I was in my second year, and I think we were like getting coffee or something. And then he told me, like, if you're serious about a girl, like, there should be no fear in telling your parents. Like, if you're actually serious. If you're not serious, then there will be fear. And that really stuck with me. So I kept that open line of communication with my parents like since that day. So I guess I was a sophomore then. So yeah.
Cool. So what would you say your relationship with your parents is like, and specifically like with your mom? Because I feel like for a lot of Desi families, usually the mom, the matriarch, is a very influential power when it comes to getting married. Or her opinion holds, a lot.
Yeah, I think my relationship with my mom is like, obviously, I respect her, I love her, anything that she says, I hold a lot of weight to it. But like, obviously, I think, the first time I may have told her that statement, she was probably freaked out or whatever. But I think my mom is a very open-minded, open-hearted person. She's like deeply into, our religion. I think she like really understands the idea of like racism is bad, and I think a lot of Desi parents don't have that. And I think the further anyone goes into Islam, into our deen, you become more like how my mom has become, where she's a lot more open-minded, open-hearted. And yeah, so I just think, she's just like she I would say like I got very lucky, obviously. It wasn't that hard for me. So like I talk a big game, but my mom was just like really amazing.
Yeah, your mom is amazing. And like I really respect that, because I think a big fear that people have about getting married to people outside of their culture, a big fear that the parents have is, well, what about our culture? They won't understand it and all this stuff. And your mom's a very culturally Pakistani woman. She really loves her culture. It's very obvious, and she loves her language. That's very obvious. But yeah, like she can separate the two things very well. And I'll say, like, I also, have a similar situation, especially with my father. So my father is very, very, invested in religion and stuff. And he, as I grew up, he kind of got more and more religious. And sometimes that would be really tough growing up because, I grew up with a very strict
I mean, you're
dad.
a kid, when you're a kid,
You want freedom. Yeah, but as I got older, I started appreciating it, because with the increase in religiosity, there was like more of an understanding about like true Islamic principles, and one of those things was about getting married. And so one of the things he told me at like, probably when I was around that same age, or around 18, is, I don't care like, what language he speaks, where he's from, or whatever. It's as long as, he prays. That was his thing. It's like, as long as he's Muslim and he prays and he's practicing, that's all I care about. So that was pretty cool to hear. I still didn't think I was going to get married to someone outside of my culture, but I think that was that was good to hear from my father, that like, you can be like, it's almost like having religious parents made it easier for both of us, because they were able to separate those two things a lot better.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think so too. And yeah, your dad is also like, very like he's a very open-minded, open-hearted person. Like he, took in his son-in-law. Like he became friends with him. I remember I told him he heard I do stand-up comedy, and I remember I was with him one time, and he like turned. He was like, "Oh, you do stand-up comedy? I heard you do stand-up comedy." And I'm like, "Yeah." And then he like paused, and then he said, "You're not very funny."
Yeah, he was really surprised, because Adil, if you meet him, you'll he's a shy guy. I'm not
I'm
shy.
not shy.
You're
I'm like
quiet. You're
I'm quiet. I'm
Yeah.
quiet, especially around elders. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I should talk if there's an elder around, because
Yeah.
they have a lot more wisdom than I do. So
Yeah.
what do I have to say that's like important,
Yeah, but I think people have this view of comedians as like, loudest voice in the room, the person gets the party going, and so my dad was really shocked to hear that's what
Yeah,
you
I
do.
think I have like I'm a lot more like, was it like, with a loose tongue with my very close friends that are my peers. Like I'll say outlandish things, but when I'm with an elder, especially like your father, I'm not gonna say outlandish things.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be just quiet and listen, because there's so much wisdom there. So
Yeah. So with all that, I think like it's important to kind of give that background, because I think we need to be honest about the advantages that we had about getting married to someone outside of our culture. We did not face a lot of the issues that other people may face when it comes to getting married, to someone when it comes to being in an interracial marriage.
but I still think that guys are just cowards, and there a lot of, like, I would say like at least over half of them, like, they're just too scared to talk to their parents, and that's just how it is. And then they'll keep a girl a secret for years, string her along, and then she'll be in like, they'll be like 22, graduated, and then she'll be devastated, he'll be devastated, and that's just like, I think there's just too much it's not even respect for your parents, because if you respected them, you would also just tell them. you tell them the truth. It's a fear that's like, it's kind of irrational. What's the worst that's gonna happen? They're gonna say no. If let's say I'm a guy talking to a girl who's outside my culture, and I want to tell my mom about it, and I've been talking to this girl for 3 months, let's say, and I go and tell my mom in 3 months. What's the worst that's gonna happen?
No, I don't want you to marry her.
Okay, and that's 3 months like I wasted of this girl's, and 3 months I wasted of my time, you know, versus I wait a year and a half and be like, and I tell this girl, yo, it's just like I just gotta graduate, you know, and then I get a job, and then, you know, then I can pay for a wedding, and then I graduate, year and a half, I get a job, and then I go to my mom and I'm like, hey, there's this girl.
Absolutely not.
Now I wasted a year and a half of this girl's time and my time, you know, so the heart is a very soft thing, you know, so you don't play with people's feelings and their hearts. Stop being cowards.
Yeah.
You know who you are.
I think someone who's in this position, right, would think like, I want to make sure that it's going to work out with this person before I give my mom the heart attack of telling her like, hey, I'm talking to this person. I'd rather make sure it's going to work out. I want to be sure. And then I'll have, you know, I'll have like more weight when I at least tell my mom, because like I know I want to marry this person.
So they want to be certain.
Basically.
The only certainty in life is death. So the only thing in your logic is that the only thing you should tell your parents is that you're gonna die one day. It's like, you can't be certain about anything. Like, what, like, you know, when I was talking to the person I married, I didn't know it was gonna work out until the day of the nikah, where I made it official. You don't know anything. Anything can happen, you know, like you're like, I've heard horror stories about things like this. Not horror stories or whatever, because, you know, it's all like, you know, written, and it's all like in, you know, the will of Allah. But like, it's like, you know, things that like, oh, I'm expecting this thing to happen, and then a complete opposite thing happens. So you never know, you know. I think there's no certainty. So like, you need to just have a better relationship with your parents where you can just be open with them. Like, hey, this might not work out, but you should know that there's this girl that I am, you know, like I like in school, or I like at work, or whatever, you know. Like, dude, I'm not like, we're talking about kids, okay, 18, 19-year-olds or whatever, but the truth is that there are like 28-year-old guys just like this.
Yeah.
Who are working professional jobs, making 6 figures, and they're still too scared to talk to their mom about somebody.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. These are the people
That you're talking to.
I really have a problem with. The college students, like, you know, your hormones are crazy and you're stupid. You don't know anything. Like, you're, you know, you're going to get a pre-med degree. You're probably not going to get into med school. So, like, you know, you're an idiot. But, you know, when you're a 28-year-old and you're talking to a girl and you still can't tell your parents that you're talking to this person until the last minute that you're like, oh, I'm certain I want to marry this person, then you're a coward. So I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry if you're out there, that it's hard to hear the truth. I'm not sorry that I said it, though. You know, this show is called Coffee and Dates, and I don't think you've had a date.
I don't like mixing sweets with my coffee. So
we didn't we had to rename the show? Like,
no, I'll eat.
I
the
just
dates.
thought the name Coffee and Dates was so clever.
I know,
like coffee date.
Yeah, it's very clever. But I'll eat the day after I drink my coffee. I just don't. My coffee's gonna.
I'll be watching. I'll make sure.
No, don't worry. I'll eat. There's 3 in there. I'll eat at least 1. So. That's
yeah,
really
I think they can see them. Yeah.
Man, I love them.
Yeah.
If your marriage is having problems, get cats. Don't have kids. Get cats.
Yeah, it looks like you've been having a lot of problems in your marriage, that you have 2 cats.
No. You know.
Like, any final words, about this podcast, or about the topic at hand?
Yeah, I think so. Just about the topic, the main lesson here that at least I'm getting from you, and I think, you know, people really need to understand, is if you have a conflicting ideology from your parents, you should tell them before you're in the situation, within the confines of Islam, obviously. But like, you were very okay with, you know, talking to Desi girls too when you told your mom that you're open to talking to non-Desi girls. But the point is, like, you told her before you were in either situation, which I think makes it a lot easier to be brave, or, you know, like, or to be more forthright with your opinion, because you know you're not hiding anything from them, and you're just saying, like, this is you know, like, this is what I'm open to. I'm telling you now, like, I'm not even looking to get married, and, you know, this is what the plan probably would be. And I think that's true for everyone. And I think, you know, especially girls really need to understand that, like, when it comes to, you know, their parents and what they want. Sometimes, you know, it's things that, you know, as a girl, you probably don't care about those things. And you should just try to be open to, like, you should be open to them about it, because, you know, you may find the person, the exact person your parents want. That's great. But you don't want to give your opinion after you've already found the person who, like, is not under those categories, because that makes it seem like you're only changing your mind because of the person you're talking to, versus, like, this is within my own opinion. Like, I've always held this opinion.
Yeah, like, you're not thinking rationally.
Yeah, you're not thinking rationally. This person has brainwashed you or whatever. It's like, at least, you know, if you've already told them this, then they're like, okay, well, she's always had this opinion. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think last thing I'll say, final word about this topic, not just about interracial marriages, but about, you know, trying to get married in general. Guys need to stop being cowards. So yeah, especially those 28-year-olds. Not even
I feel like
not
this is personal.
not
There's
even
someone you have in mind, Adil. Like, there's a guy that you're
not even the
about.
27-year-olds or the 29-year-olds, the 28-year-olds specifically. Something's wrong with you. Yeah. Yeah, those guys, man. No, anyone who's like out of college, you're cowards. Okay, so that's it. That's the first episode of Coffee and Dates. My name is Adil.
I'm Fatima.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
Yeah. To clarify, we're married to each other. I don't know if they got that. You said we were friends.
Plot twist.
Okay.